One of the most common concepts in Overwatch that I see players asking about all the time is positioning. And I totally get it. Positioning is complicated. It's hard. It's not always clear whether or not where you're standing is actually strong or not. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving you guys 5 steps that should help you improve your positioning skills. We're going to keep the advice in this video fairly broad so that it applies to all players regardless of whatever role or heroes you're playing. But of course, don't forget that it is expected for your positioning styles to change depending on your hero choice. You're not going to play in the same spots as Reinhardt as you would as Zenyatta, obviously. But before jumping in, I want to remind you guys that if you're really looking to improve your play, you should head over to GameLeap.com. Over there, you'll find hundreds of guides and more being added every single week made by our top level coaches. And the information in these videos is really in-depth. This is usually stuff you'd only find by booking private coaching sessions with really high level coaches. And I know what you're thinking, you've heard this before. Is it really worth it? Should I really sign up for a membership? Well, here's the deal. This month only, we're running a 50% discount on your membership, so you may as well try it out, see if it's for you, see if these tips can help you improve, and go from there. So use that code you just saw on screen and click the link below to get your membership started. Your first step for finding strong positioning will be to determine where the team fight is going to start. We'll call this the fight zone. And there are 3 key things you should be looking for helping you determine where that fight zone is. The first is simply the map objective, whether it's a Koth point, a payload, or the push robot. Most fights will happen either on the objective itself or on the path to the objective. Not many teams will take the fight super far away from where the point is because it doesn't really benefit them to do so. Most fights will eventually end on the objective, so you should expect them to start at least somewhat close by. Next, you should be looking for any important geometry that players will want to be fighting around. Important choke points or corners, or of course those oppressive high grounds. And third, you should always be checking in on the front lines of both teams, and typically this means the tank member on both sides. This is usually pretty easy to keep track of when you're dealing with frontline tanks like Reinhardt or Orisa, since teamfights usually start when those types of tanks start bashing their heads against each other. But if we're looking at tanks with more mobility, say dive tanks like Winston, Doomfist, or Wrecking Ball, then you need to not only account for their active positions, but where their cooldowns can take them. Make sure you're able to keep up no matter how deep they start the fight. And if you happen to be the one playing tank in these situations, and you get to choose where and when to get the fight started, then make sure you take into account where your teammates are as well. How are their sight lines looking? Do they have cooldowns available? All that kind of stuff is important before you get the fight going. Now, once we figure out where the fight zone is, we just need to make sure we can adequately influence it. We have range on our weapons, we have cooldowns available, and we're able to get onto targets in that fight zone whenever we can. This doesn't mean we need to be in the middle of it. In fact, for most backline heroes like DPS and supports, we rarely want to be, but at the very least, we need to be able to see into it and make sure we can focus down targets that find themselves fighting there. All right, so we know where the fight's happening, we can see everything going on. Our next step is to focus on personal safety and effectiveness. For your own personal safety, there's a couple things you should think about. Natural cover, natural cover, natural cover, and of course natural cover. Whether you're in the front line, the back line, on the flank, on high grounds, wherever you find yourself, you should be using natural cover to make sure you are safe. The positioning and effectiveness of your teammates can make these positions safer with healing sightlines, shields, or defensive cooldowns, but you shouldn't be relying on those for a base level of personal safety. Natural cover will always be there for you. Please use it more often. In addition to natural cover, you should be trying to identify specific threats on the enemy team that you need to either deal with or avoid. This means you'll want to avoid things like open sightlines against a Widow, getting caught on the flank against a Tracer, or even just getting too close to the front line against tanks like Orisa. The hardest part about this step is that you need to keep up with the changes of enemy positions to adequately respond to those threats. That Widow's not going to stay in one spot forever, so you need to be able to adapt your positioning to their threat level. And with safety out of the way, you just need to focus on your personal effectiveness, making sure you're doing enough damage, using your cooldowns well, all that kind of stuff. The main thing you'll be thinking about for this will be your effective range of your hero. You're going to play very close up as someone like Junkrat or Reaper, but you're going to be sticking more to the backline as someone like Ana or Zenyatta. And you can push this a little bit further by changing your position slightly based on the availability of your threatening cooldowns. If you're going for a big play, you'll go a little bit more aggressively. If you are waiting for cooldowns to come back, you'll probably play a little bit more defensively. Alright, by now we should have a good idea of where the fight is starting and the types of safe spaces that we can occupy without exposing ourselves while still being able to effectively influence that fight. But of course, we're not just going to sit still and camp there forever because fight zones will change. Kills will be traded back and forth, ultimates will be used, and we'll need to update our position accordingly. So our next step is to plan out our disengage options. What this means basically is we need to have an escape plan ready to go if the worst possible case happens. If our entire team dies, if the enemy team starts using 5 ultimates, if we need to get out right away, we should know how to do that. You should still have some natural cover to rely on for immediate threats, but you should also have a plan of action in case you need to back off that position entirely. This can look very different depending on what types of heroes you're playing, what ranges they're playing at, what cooldowns they have available to keep themselves safe and stuff like that, but you need to make sure that you've got options to get out when it's absolutely necessary. A good thing to keep in mind when planning your disengage options is that you don't always need to back up in a straight line. You don't always need to tuck tail and run back to the spawn room. You can instead try to trade space by rotating around important locations on the map. This will of course change based on what types of threats you're dealing with, but if you're able to maintain any amount of map control instead of giving it up entirely, you'll have a much easier time to rejoin the fight once that threat is off the table. So if you manage to outduel that threat or just outlast an ultimate that's going, you'll be able to get back in and start influencing that fight zone right away. So we know where the fight zone is going to be, we know what positions we want to take to get things started, and we know how to get out when we need to. But what about the other side of the coin? What if we start winning a fight? Our next step is to plan out our aggressive developments. The key here is that you don't want to just beeline it into the fight just because you start winning, because if you give up too many positional advantages or too many angles that you were threatening before, that advantage will quickly go away. Imagine a situation where you're attacking King's Row first point, and the enemy team has a tank like a Reinhardt or an Orisa that's hard holding at that corner where everyone holds between the point and the statue. If you manage to force them back with enough damage and by trading out cooldowns, maybe you didn't find a kill yet, but they're forced to back off, you now have options to develop aggressively. A very common reaction to the situation will be to just push forward into that space where the enemy just backed out of. This, of course, gives us more space, but doesn't really give us many more options. We're still just threatening in a straight line, and we're not really creating any unique plays around the map. What you should be thinking about is treating this as a whole new fight zone. We've won the first fight by forcing them to back off and maybe burn some cooldowns, maybe we even got a kill, who knows. But to continue that fight means we need to find new advantages to push into new space. So maybe we try things like pushing quickly with big cooldowns through the hotel on our left, or using mobility to take new angles on the high ground to our right. Doing this allows us to continue pressuring all that space that they just gave up, but also still follows all the previous steps of giving us information about the new fight zone, giving us more personal safety with natural cover, and giving us more options to play around. Keep in mind that just because we started with an advantage that was able to push those enemies back, doesn't mean that we'll be able to maintain that advantage forever. We need to keep playing for smart space and strong aggressive options if we want to keep winning this fight. So just like our disengage options, try to plan out these aggressive movements in advance. What type of space do you want to explode into once that tank is out of the way? Or once you've dealt with a threat on a flank, how are you going to use that space for yourself? So with just those 4 steps, you should already have a clear idea of what types of positions will be strong based on your given hero choice and how to deal with positions after you get pushed out or when you're able to take more space aggressively. My next step for improving your positioning is pretty open-ended, and that's just to have faster mid-fight adjustments. Everything we've talked about so far can be pre-planned before a fight even breaks out. But as I'm sure you all know, team fighting in Overwatch is messy. It gets chaotic and complicated very fast. It can be near impossible to determine whether or not we can actually depend on all those plans we set for ourselves or just how we should be adjusting our position in general. So let's talk about a few of the things that you should be looking out for in the middle of a team fight to help you make those decisions. So first things first, we can never neglect personal safety. We should always be sticking to natural cover, and even when we do need to move through open space, we should be minimizing the amount of time we spend there. And beyond that, we just need to keep tabs on all of our biggest threats. Is there a specific sightline we need to avoid? Is there a big cooldown we need to wait out? Or is that tank just running straight at us and maybe we should get out of the way? Like I mentioned, these are things that are very difficult to keep track of in the middle of a chaotic team fight. So try to narrow your search down to 1 or maybe 2 problem members of the enemy team and keep your eyes on them specifically. But on the other side of things, when you're looking to get aggressive with your cooldowns or trying to hit a new sightline of your own, try to synergize with as many teammates as you can. Try to recognize when your tank is getting aggressive and you can push with them, and try to focus down the same targets as your DPS teammates. Whatever the case is, any synergy you find with your teammates will likely find more success than things you could do on your own. 2 is always going to be greater than 1. And keep in mind what we talked about earlier. This doesn't mean that you need to be walking hand in hand with whoever you're trying to synergize with. You should be looking to get creative and find new angles, but making sure you're still fighting for the same opportunities as your teammates. Try to be a part of as many of these individual opportunities as you can to better influence or carry these team fights for you and your team. But beyond that, you should also be looking for macro or big picture changes to the team fight that can help you determine your own adjustments. The main things you'll be looking for here are when kills are coming through in the kill feed or when members are using ultimates. The more kills that your team has or the more ultimates that your team is using, the more aggressive you can be in general. And the same is true in reverse. When the enemy team finds picks or they're using ultimates, you'll probably need to play more defensively and give up space instead. Just keep in mind that these macro changes shouldn't overwrite your priorities with individual advantages. Just because your team got a kill doesn't mean you want to run headfirst into that Widow's sightline. Positioning is such an important skill to work on in Overwatch 2. It might not be as flashy as clicking heads or hitting big ultimate combos, but I promise you that you will always find more value the stronger your positioning is. So I hope the advice in this video gives you a clear path forward for working on this very important skill. Or at the very least, I hope it gives you the tools to answer for yourself whether or not your positioning is actually any good or not. And if you're looking for more direct feedback about positioning or any of the other skills important to Overwatch 2, you should head over to GameLeap.com. Over there, you'll find hundreds of videos and more being added every single week made by our top level coaches. These videos are designed to help you improve at every skill important to the game and help you rise up the ranks. So whether you're brand new to the game and just learning the basics, or you've been here for a while and you're trying to master all the unique skills that your hero requires, GameLeap has something for you. So head over to the website right now and get your membership started today. And that's going to be it for me today, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.